The morning sun cast long shadows across the school bus depot as Marcus Williams performed his final inspection of Bus 47. 43 years of driving these yellow giants, and today would be his last. His calloused fingers traced the worn steering wheel, remembering countless mornings just like this one, countless children who trusted him to deliver them safely to their futures. At 67, Marcus's body carried the weight of decades behind the wheel-aching knees from climbing in and out of the driver's seat, shoulders permanently curved from hunching over to check mirrors, eyes that had seen too much joy and far too much sorrow. But it was his heart that bore the heaviest burden, and it had nothing to do with age. The cleaning supplies rattled in his weathered hands as he began clearing out personal items accumulated over the years. Coffee-stained route schedules, emergency contact lists written in his careful cursive, a small photo of his late wife Martha taped to the dashboard. All the detritus of a career spent shepherding other people's most precious cargo. It was while removing the collection of faded papers from behind the sun visor that his fingers brushed against something unexpected. Wedged deep into the map pocket, pushed so far back it had been invisible for decades, was a small piece of notebook paper. The kind with wide, ruled lines that elementary schools used. Marcus pulled it free with trembling fingers, and his world tilted on its axis. The handwriting was childlike, formed with the careful precision of someone still learning to make letters cooperate. Some words were misspelled, others crossed out and rewritten, but the message was clear enough to stop his heart. "Mr. Marcus, I hid this for you to find. Follow the red X's on the map. Please don't let them hurt me anymore. I'm scared, but I know you're a good man. You always smile at me. Help me, please. Keisha Washington." The route map slipped from his nerveless fingers, floating to the bus floor like a leaf. 23 years. 23 years since 8-year-old Keisha Washington had vanished from his bus on a Tuesday morning in October 1987, and the case had haunted every mile he'd driven since. Marcus sank into the driver's seat, his legs suddenly unable to support him. The memories came flooding back with brutal clarity, memories he tried to bury, but which lived just beneath the surface of every working day. October 13th, 1987. Route 12, his regular morning pickup. Keisha had been the third child to board at the Maple Street stop, her bright yellow backpack bouncing against her small frame as she climbed the steps with her characteristic enthusiasm. She'd been wearing a red sweater that day. He remembered because it had been her favorite, worn thin at the elbows from countless washings. "Morning, Mr. Marcus," she'd chirped, her gap-toothed smile lighting up the dim interior of the bus. "My mama packed me peanut butter and grape jelly today. It's my favorite." "That sounds mighty fine, Miss Keisha," he'd replied, watching in the mirror as she made her way to her usual seat, third row from the front, right side, always by the window so she could watch the world go by. She'd been one of those children who found wonder in everything, the way frost made patterns on windows, how leaves changed colors, the fact that the same bus route could look completely different depending on the light. The other children had filtered in at subsequent stops, the Morrison twins with their matching backpacks, little Jimmy Chen who always forgot his lunch money, Sarah Williams, no relation despite the shared surname, who read chapter books that seemed too advanced for her age. 17 children in total that morning, ranging from kindergartners to 5th graders. Marcus had made every stop perfectly, following Route 12 exactly as he had hundreds of times before. Until they'd reached Oakwood Elementary, and he'd done his usual head count before opening the doors. 16 children. The realization had hit him like a physical blow. He'd counted again, then a third time, his eyes frantically scanning every seat. Keisha Washington was gone. Simply, impossibly gone. The other children had been questioned immediately. Nobody remembered seeing her leave. Nobody had heard anything unusual. Most claimed they'd been dozing during the 20-minute ride, which wasn't uncommon for the early morning route. Some children read quietly, others stared out windows, a few even napped, but nobody had witnessed Keisha's disappearance. The police had responded quickly, but their investigation felt perfunctory from the start. Detective Morrison, a gruff man 3 years from retirement, had taken notes with obvious impatience. Missing children from troubled homes were common enough, he'd explained. Runaways, usually. Kids acting out against unstable family situations. But she loved school, Marcus had insisted. Never missed a day. always excited about whatever they were learning. This wasn't a runaway situation. Detective Morrison had given him a look that suggested bus drivers should stick to driving. You'd be surprised how often family troubles don't show on the surface, Williams. Kids are good at hiding problems. The case had gone cold within 3 weeks. No witnesses, no evidence of foul play, no leads worth pursuing. Keisha Washington had simply vanished from the official record, another statistic in a file cabinet somewhere. But Marcus had never forgotten. How could he? Every morning for 23 years he'd driven past that Maple Street stop and remembered the little girl with the gap-toothed smile and the threadbare red sweater. Every afternoon when he'd passed Oakwood Elementary, he'd wondered what had happened in those crucial minutes between pickup and destination. Now, holding her note with hands that shook with more than age, Marcus felt the full weight of his failure crushing down on him. She'd tried to tell him something was wrong. She'd trusted him enough to leave a message, to believe that he would find it and help her. And he'd failed completely. The route map lay crumpled on the floor, and Marcus bent slowly to retrieve it. His joints protested, but the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the anguish in his chest. As he smoothed out the creases, he could see them. Faint red X's marked in what must have been crayon, so light they were barely visible after more than 2 decades. 3 X's total. The first marked Miller's Creek, a wooded area about halfway through the route where the bus occasionally had to stop for various reasons. Mechanical issues, traffic delays, sometimes just to let emergency vehicles pass. The second X was placed over the old Hartwell property, a Victorian house that had been abandoned even back in 1987, sitting on about 10 acres of overgrown land. The third mark was behind what used to be the Riverside Motel, a rundown establishment that had catered to long-term residents and people down on their luck. Marcus studied the map with growing horror. These weren't random locations. They formed a triangle around Route 12, and he remembered now that the bus had indeed stopped at Miller's Creek that morning. Engine trouble, he'd logged it as. Just a brief stop while he'd checked under the hood, maybe 5 minutes total. Long enough, he realized now, for someone to slip aboard unseen while his attention was elsewhere. The implications made him sick. Someone had planned this, someone who knew the route, knew the timing, knew exactly when and where to act. This hadn't been random, it had been calculated, predatory, methodical. Marcus pulled out his cell phone with shaking fingers and dialed the police department. The dispatcher connected him to Detective Sarah Chen, a woman in her 30s who'd recently been assigned to review cold cases. Detective Chen, this is Marcus Williams. I drove school bus for 43 years, just retired today. I need to report new evidence in a case from 1987, the disappearance of Keisha Washington. There was a pause. Mr. Williams, I'm actually familiar with that case. I've been reviewing it as part of our cold case initiative. What kind of evidence are we talking about? Marcus described the note, the map, the red X's marking specific locations. Detective Chen listened without interruption, and he could hear the scratch of pen on paper as she took notes. Mr. Williams, I need you to come in immediately. Don't touch that note any more than you already have. We'll need to process it for fingerprints, though after 23 years. Can you be here within the hour? I'm on my way. The police station smelled the same as it had in 1987. Coffee, disinfectant, and the particular mustiness of old paperwork. Detective Chen met him in the lobby, a compact woman with intelligent dark eyes and an aura of barely contained energy. She wore her black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and carried herself with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to being underestimated. Mr. Williams, thank you for coming in so quickly. I have to tell you, I've been losing sleep over the Washington case. There were too many inconsistencies in the original investigation. She led him to a small conference room where Keisha's file lay spread across the table. Photos, witness statements, police reports, all the official documentation of a little girl's disappearance. Seeing it all laid out like that, Marcus felt the familiar stab of guilt that had been his constant companion for over 2 decades. What kind of inconsistencies? He asked, settling carefully into a plastic chair that creaked under his weight. Detective Chen pulled out a manila folder thick with additional papers. I've been digging deeper than the original investigation did. For starters, I contacted the Department of Social Services and requested Keisha's medical records from the months leading up to her disappearance. She slid several photocopied documents across the table. 3 emergency room visits in the 6 months before she vanished. Broken wrist in April. treated for what her mother called a fall downstairs, bruised ribs in June allegedly from falling off her bike, facial contusions in August, supposedly from running into a door. Marcus felt sick as he scanned the medical reports. The injuries were documented with clinical precision, but he could read between the lines. These weren't accidents, they were systematic abuse. The attending physicians noted their concerns, Detective Chen continued. Dr. Patricia Hayes at Riverside General actually called for a social services wellness check after the facial injuries. But when the caseworker visited, Keisha's mother, Vanessa Washington, was cooperative, and the home appeared stable. The case was closed without further action. What about the mother? Was she... Marcus couldn't finish the question. Vanessa Washington was a victim too, from what I can determine. 22 years old, high school dropout, working 2 minimum wage jobs to support herself and Keisha. But here's the crucial detail. She had a boyfriend at the time, Tommy Hartwell. And that name should sound familiar. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. The Hartwell property. One of the X's on the map. Exactly. Thomas Tommy Hartwell, aged 28 in 1987, owned the old Victorian house and surrounding land through an inheritance from his grandmother. Had a record for domestic violence, public intoxication, and 1 arrest for child endangerment that was pleaded down to a misdemeanor. Detective Chen pulled out another set of documents: arrest records, court filings, witness statements. The child endangerment charge came from a neighbor who reported seeing him discipline a child behind his property. The case fell apart when the witness moved out of state and declined to testify. The pieces were falling into place with horrifying clarity. Marcus stared at the route map with its faded red X's, understanding now what Keisha had been trying to tell him. She'd known she was in danger. She'd tried to leave him clues, breadcrumbs that might lead someone to her rescue. "We need to search that property," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've already started the paperwork for a search warrant. But Mr. Williams, you need to understand, after 23 years, the chances of finding anything conclusive are—" "I know," he interrupted, "but I owe her this much. I owe her family this much." Detective Chen's expression softened. "The original investigation failed her, Mr. Williams. But that wasn't your fault. You were a bus driver, not a detective. You couldn't have known what was happening." "But she tried to tell me," Marcus said, touching the plastic evidence bag that now contained Keisha's note. "She trusted me enough to leave this message, and I never found it. For 23 years, she's been waiting for someone to follow her map." The search warrant was approved within 6 hours, expedited due to the potential connection to a cold case involving a missing child. Judge Patricia Moore, a woman known for her advocacy on behalf of children's rights, had reviewed the evidence personally and signed the order without delay. Marcus had requested permission to accompany the search team, and Detective Chen had agreed despite protocol concerns. "You knew that child," she'd said. "If we find anything, we might need your insights." The Hartwell property looked like something from a Gothic novel. A 3-story Victorian house with ornate gingerbread trim, now weathered gray and sagging under the weight of decades of neglect. Windows stared blindly from beneath collapsed awnings, and the wraparound porch had partially collapsed, creating a gap-toothed smile that reminded Marcus painfully of Keisha. The forensics team worked methodically, their white Tyvek suits making them look like ghosts moving through the autumn afternoon. They started with the main house, room by room, floor by floor, using ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs to search for any trace of human remains. Marcus waited by the patrol cars, fighting the urge to pace. Every fiber of his being wanted to be in that house, searching personally for some sign of the little girl who'd trusted him with her secret message. But he forced himself to remain still, watching the systematic process of professional investigation. Detective Chen approached him as the afternoon stretched toward evening. Her expression was carefully controlled, but Marcus could see something in her eyes. Not the grim satisfaction of a discovery, but something more complex. "Marcus, we found something. Not what we were expecting." In the basement of the house, behind a false wall that had been skillfully constructed, investigators had discovered a small room. It was perhaps 8 feet by 10 feet, with no windows and only one entrance. But it wasn't a tomb. It was a prison. A narrow cot sat against one wall, covered with blankets that had once been colorful but were now faded with age. Shelves lined the walls, filled with children's books, coloring books, and boxes of crayons. Most remarkably, Every available surface was covered with drawings, hundreds of them, rendered in crayon and colored pencil with the distinctive style of a child's imagination. Many of the drawings depicted the same subject: a yellow school bus with 47 painted on its side. In some pictures, the bus was surrounded by sunshine and flowers. In others, it drove through rain or snow. But in every single image, there was a smiling figure behind the wheel, a man with kind eyes wearing a bus driver's cap. Detective Chen led Marcus to a small table in the corner, where investigators had found what appeared to be a journal. The notebook was filled with entries written in the same careful handwriting as the note he'd discovered that morning. October 15th, 1987. Tommy says if I try to run away, he'll hurt Mama worse than he already does. He made me write a note for Mr. Marcus about being scared, but I couldn't give it to him because Tommy would know. I hid it in the bus instead, where maybe someday someone will find it. I hope Mr. Marcus knows I didn't want to leave without saying goodbye. Marcus's knees buckled, and Detective Chen caught his arm to steady him. 23 years of guilt and self-recrimination came crashing down as he realized the horrible truth: Keisha hadn't simply vanished. She'd been kidnapped, imprisoned, held captive by a monster who'd known exactly how to exploit her love for her mother. "There's more," Detective Chen said gently. "The journal entries continue for almost 3 years. She never stopped hoping someone would find her note and follow the map she'd drawn." The entries painted a picture of unimaginable horror tempered by the resilience of a child's spirit. Tommy Hartwell had kept Keisha prisoner in that basement room, telling her mother that she'd run away, threatening to kill both of them if Keisha ever tried to escape. He'd provided her with books and art supplies, perhaps to keep her quiet, perhaps from some twisted sense of care. But the drawings and journal entries revealed the true story: a little girl who never stopped believing that Mr. Marcus, the kind bus driver with the gentle smile, would eventually find her message and come to her rescue. December 3rd, 1987. I dream about riding the school bus again. In my dreams, Mr. Marcus lets me sit in the front seat and I help him watch for other cars. We sing songs and he tells me about all the other children he drives to school. I try to remember their names so when I get back I can ask about them. March 17th, 1988. Tommy brought me new coloring books today. I drew another picture of Bus 47. I make Mr. Marcus's smile bigger in each picture because I want to remember how safe I felt when I saw him in the morning. Mama always said he was a good man, one of the few good men in the world. I hope she still thinks about me sometimes. The final entries were dated February 1990. Keisha had managed to escape during a winter storm when Tommy had been drinking heavily and forgotten to secure the locks properly. She'd run through the snow in bare feet, flagged down a truck driver on the highway, and been taken to a hospital in the next county. But here the trail went cold. With no identification and too traumatized to provide coherent information about her identity or origin, she'd been placed in the state foster care system under the name Jane Doe, until adoptive parents had given her a new identity entirely. Detective Chen spent the next 3 days working with social services databases, cross-referencing missing children reports with foster care placements. The breakthrough came when she found a notation in the files about a girl who'd been found with distinctive scarring on her hands marks that matched medical records from Keisha's childhood injuries. Catherine Williams, Detective Chen announced when she called Marcus with the news. That's her name now. Age 31, married with 2 children of her own. She's a special education teacher in Portland, Oregon. And Marcus, she's been looking for information about her past for years. She never forgot about the kind bus driver who used to smile at her every morning. The phone call was arranged for the following afternoon. Marcus sat in his kitchen, surrounded by the detritus of his retirement party cards from colleagues, a gold watch he'd never wear, a plaque commemorating his years of service. None of it seemed to matter now. His hands shook as he dialed the number Detective Chen had provided. The phone rang twice before a woman's voice answered. Mature, professional, but with an underlying warmth that reminded him immediately of the 8-year-old girl who used to brighten his mornings. Hello? Is this Catherine Williams? Yes. Who's calling? Marcus took a deep breath. 23 years of grief and hope, compressed into a single moment. Catherine, this is Marcus Williams. I used to drive school bus Route 12 in 1987. I believe I knew you when you were Keisha Washington. The silence stretched so long that Marcus wondered if the connection had been lost. Then he heard a soft intake of breath, followed by a whispered, "Mr. Marcus?" "Yes, sweetheart. It's me." Oh my God, I can't believe. I've been hoping for this call for so long. Did you find my note? Did you follow the map? Marcus closed his eyes, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "I found it, Keisha. I found it, and I'm so sorry it took me 23 years. I'm so sorry I couldn't help you when you needed me most." "You did help me," she said firmly. "Mr. Marcus, you have to understand. You were the one bright spot in my world back then. Every morning on that bus, for those few minutes, I felt safe and valued and cared for. That feeling is what kept me alive in that terrible place. I would close my eyes and remember your smile, and it would get me through another day." They talked for 2 hours, bridging 23 years with words that couldn't possibly encompass the magnitude of what had happened. Catherine, she preferred her adopted name now, told him about her escape, her years in foster care, her adoption by loving parents who'd helped her heal. She'd become a teacher specifically to work with traumatized children, using her own experience to help others find their way back to trust and hope. "I have 2 children now," she said. "Emma is 8, the same age I was when it happened. And seeing her at that age, so innocent and trusting, it breaks my heart all over again for what that little girl went through. But it also fills me with gratitude for everything that came after." Marcus arranged to fly to Portland the following week. The reunion took place at Catherine's home, a modest 2-story house with a garden in the front yard and children's bicycles on the porch. When she opened the door, Marcus saw immediately the woman that little Keisha had grown into, still small in stature, but with an aura of strength and competence that spoke to her journey from victim to survivor. Her husband, David, was a counselor who worked with at-risk youth. Their children, Emma, 8, and Michael, 6, had inherited their mother's bright smile and curious nature. Catherine had prepared them for this meeting, explaining that Mr. Marcus was someone very special from her childhood, someone who had helped keep her safe during a difficult time. "Mr. Marcus!" Emma ran to him immediately, throwing her arms around his waist with the uninhibited affection of childhood. "Mommy told us you used to drive her to school in a big yellow bus." "That's right," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your mama was one of my favorite passengers. She always had the biggest smile and the most interesting things to say." They spent the afternoon looking through photo albums, Catherine sharing the story of her recovery and the family she'd built. She'd graduated from college with honors, earned a master's degree in special education, and spent the last decade working with children who'd experienced trauma. "Every child I work with," she explained, "I see a little bit of myself. And I try to be for them what you were for me, that one person who sees their worth, who believes in their potential, who reminds them that they deserve kindness." As evening approached, Catherine walked Marcus to his rental car. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke from neighborhood fireplaces. It reminded him of that October morning in 1987, when the world had changed forever with the disappearance of one small girl. "Mr. Marcus," Catherine said, her hand resting on his arm, "I need you to know something. All these years you've been carrying guilt that isn't yours to carry. You did everything right. You were exactly the person I needed you to be. But I didn't find your note in time. I didn't save you." Catherine smiled, and for a moment he could see the 8-year-old girl she'd been, gap-toothed and bright with curiosity. "You did save me. Every morning when I got on your bus, you saved me a little bit. You showed me what kindness looked like, what safety felt like. You gave me something to hold on to when everything else was darkness." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small framed photograph, one of her crayon drawings from the basement prison, showing Bus 47 with its smiling driver. "I kept this one. Through foster care, through adoption, through everything. It reminded me that there were good people in the world, people worth surviving for." Marcus accepted the drawing with trembling hands, studying the careful details. The yellow bus, the number 47, the figure behind the wheel with kind eyes and a gentle smile. It was how she'd remembered him, how she'd chosen to remember him during the darkest period of her life. "Thank you," he whispered, "for surviving, for becoming the incredible woman you are, for giving me the chance to know that the story didn't end in that basement." 6 months later, Marcus received an invitation to Emma's 9th birthday party. He drove to Portland, carrying a carefully wrapped present, a toy school bus, painted yellow with 47 on the side. When Emma unwrapped it, her eyes lit up with delight. "It's just like the one you used to drive Mommy in," she exclaimed. "That's right," Marcus said. "And just like that bus, this one will always take you safely home." Catherine caught his eye across the crowded living room and smiled. Home, Marcus realized, wasn't always a place. Sometimes it was a feeling, a moment of connection, a reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, human kindness could find a way to shine through. The guilt would never completely disappear. 23 years of wondering what if couldn't be erased overnight, but it had transformed into something else. A deep appreciation for the resilience of the human spirit, and a understanding that sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply be present, be kind, and trust that our small acts of compassion ripple out in ways we may never fully comprehend. As he drove home from the birthday party, Marcus thought about all the children he'd transported over the years, thousands of them, each with their own story, their own struggles, their own dreams. He'd been privileged to be part of their daily journey, even in such a small way. And now he understood that sometimes being a guardian meant more than just ensuring safe passage from point A to point B. Sometimes it meant providing a moment of peace in a chaotic world. A smile in the midst of fear, a reminder that they mattered. The route map still sat in his glove compartment, but now it represented something different. Not failure, but the long and winding path that had led them all back to each other. Not all disappearances end in reunion, but sometimes, just sometimes, love and determination can bridge even the widest gaps. Marcus Williams had driven his last route, but the most important journey, the one that had led Keisha Washington home, was finally complete. The little girl with the gap-toothed smile and the bright yellow backpack had grown into a woman who spent her days teaching children that they were safe, that they mattered, that someone would always be watching out for them. The circle, at long last, was unbroken.